Welcome everybody to the Education at the Intersection of Equity and Innovation Thursday gathering. My name is Marcus Howard and I'm the expert in residence with Venture Cafe St. Louis and the moderator for this evening's conversation. We want to start off by thanking our sponsor, the Regional Business Council, for making this series possible. The Regional Business Council is a consortium of 100 CEOs representing large mid-cap companies in the local St. Louis metropolitan areas. The mission of the Regional Business Council is to unite and engage members to act on a high-impact business, civic, and philanthropic affairs for the betterment of the St. Louis region. The goal of this speaker series is to motivate and empower listeners to think outside the proverbial box of what we think education should look like, sound like, or feel like. Throughout this series, we will showcase innovators around the country who are thinking radically different about not only how to rethink education, but how to provide new and equitable experiences to all students, including those who identify as low income, underrepresented minorities, and or those students who are most proximate to the injustices in our education system. The talks will follow the same format. We'll introduce the speaker will lead a learning experience, we will have a brief Q&A, and then we will close. If listeners have questions, they're to put those questions in the chat, and during Q&A, the moderator will read some of those questions in the chat. To our guest, Cameron White is a partner at an organization called NewSchools Venture Fund, a nonprofit venture working to reimagine public education for students furthest away from opportunity. And Cameron, while working with the organization, invest in learning solutions that empower Black, Latino, and low-income students. During this time, he has supported more than 100 early-stage education technology ventures through philanthropic capital, as well as strategic feedback and guidance relating to suitable student impact, research-based product design, fundraising, and sustainable growth. Cameron is an Ivy League grad, receiving his undergrad from Princeton in architecture and his master's degree from Teachers College of Columbia University in Instructional Technology and Media. Cameron, thank you so much for joining us today. The St. Louis community is really excited to have you and welcome.
Hey, sorry about that. How's it going? My internet is back. I am back. Let me get my screen shared. Alrighty. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Cameron White. I'm a partner at NewSchools Venture Fund. I'm based in Tampa, Florida, where there's currently a thunderstorm, so hopefully my connection stays strong. NewSchools is a nonprofit venture philanthropy firm based in Oakland, California. Our mission is to increase educational opportunities so that all students graduate high school prepared and inspired to accomplish their most ambitious dreams and plans. We invest in financial and non-financial support into early stage education organizations working in 3 areas: creating innovative school models, increasing the diversity of education leadership, and developing education technology. Today, we will focus specifically on our education technology and learning solutions investment strategy. I wanted to begin by giving a little bit of my background and how I got into this work. In undergraduate, I majored in architecture, and I ended up writing my thesis on the intersection of environmental design and early childhood development. And in that, I really focused on the experience that children have before they learn language and how that affects the way that they interact with objects in their environment. And specifically, thinking about how designers of these objects can fulfill children's need for both protection and creativity. After undergrad, I moved to Washington, D.C., and began my career in education at Haynes Public Charter School. And in that role, I really focused on the connection between learning inside a school and outside of school. Next, I had an opportunity to come over to NewSchools. So this is back in 2010 now, 11 years ago, moved out to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I began my career at NewSchools in a role that was focused on development and education. Over time, I became drawn toward education technology and decided to go back to graduate school and began my master's program at Teachers College in New York City, studying instructional technology and media. And in this program, I had another chance to explore the relationship between designers and learners, and came to this realization that in many cases, information is presented in this one-way direction. Mobile and social technology represent an opportunity to encourage student voice and agency by allowing them to talk back to the advertisements and art that they encounter in the environment. Next, I had a chance to move back to the Bay Area and put some of these ideas into action. I was on the founding team as associate director of co.lab, which was an accelerator focused on game-based learning. A couple years later, I became an associate partner on NewSchools EdTech team, and I helped to launch a series of EdTech challenges focused on critical areas within pre-K-12 education. Earlier this year, we launched a new iteration of our strategy, and I became a partner on our learning solutions team. And so our goal with this strategy is to support EdTech and other solutions that increase equity in education by accelerating positive outcomes for historically underserved students. We define increasing equity as removing barriers to high quality learning opportunities for all students. We work with organizations that are targeting a range of academic, social, emotional, and life outcomes. And we focus specifically on students that have been historically underserved by the US education system, including Black and Latino students, students living in poverty, students with disabilities, and English language learners. Since 2015, we've invested over $14 million into 85 ventures that are addressing critical student needs across these 7 focus areas. We're continuing to collect data to understand these ventures' collective impact, and I've included here on the slide a snapshot of some of what we're learning so far. At the beginning of this year, we launched the new strategy, as I mentioned, focused on supporting tools, content, and models that are designed to increase equity. And one of our main focus areas is literacy. We launched a funding opportunity focused on literacy earlier this year, and we're planning to announce our first cohort of 10 organizations in the next month or so. Our goal with this funding opportunity was to fund a diverse portfolio of leaders developing early stage equity-centered solutions. We decided to focus on literacy because it's the foundation for all learning. Reading and writing skills empower students to pursue their dreams, enable them to share new ideas, and give them the tools to participate fully in society. Students of all races, abilities, and linguistic backgrounds deserve the opportunity to build literacy skills. In particular, there is a need for literacy content and tools that better meet the needs of Black, Latino, and low-income students. Learning solutions can create opportunities for effective instruction by honoring these students' experiences, supporting their academic and social growth, and encouraging them to use their voices in and beyond the classroom. On this slide, I've included a few of the specific investment theses that we're testing out through these investments. Given that we're a venture philanthropy rather than financial return, we're really looking for investments that create a social return. And we define impact through a combination of 3 factors: equity, efficacy, and sustainable growth. We believe that all 3 are important for achieving NewSchools' mission. At the same time, we realize that being an early stage entrepreneur is challenging and requires prioritization of limited resources. Working across that large group of ventures we've supported so far, we've begun to recognize key questions faced in these areas. Venture leaders want to understand, what does it mean to develop EdTech with equity at the center? Is our EdTech tool actually making a positive difference for students and educators? And how can we sustainably grow while reaching high priority student groups? These are complex questions, and the answers vary depending on the specifics of each product and the local context where it's being implemented. That said, I'd like to close by offering 5 practices that early stage EdTech developers can consider to help support their efforts and maximize their impact. The first practice is to make sure that your product is addressing critical student needs. This image is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the base of the pyramid are fundamental human needs such as food, shelter, health, and safety. These set the foundation for healthy human interactions, including love and belonging. Finally, students are motivated to build and share respect, achievement, and ultimately self-actualization. When you're building an EdTech product, it's important to think about how your value proposition relates to students' needs, including the reality of students' environments beyond their technology experiences. At the base, we can think about technology's ability to increase access to content and learning experiences that are aligned with students' goals and needs. In order to ensure healthy, safe interactions with technology, developers must take responsibility for students' privacy and security, especially as increasingly sensitive data are captured. Technology can also facilitate new types of social interactions with peers, educators, parents, and community members. Outcomes, academic and social emotional growth, and ultimately fulfillment, happiness, and positive life outcomes. A second important practice I want to share is to notice and reflect throughout the design process. This graphic comes from the Liberatory Design Framework developed in partnership by the Stanford D School K-12 Lab and the National Equity Project. Building on standard design thinking practices, this framework asks developers to practice increased self-awareness and reflection on the impact of their own beliefs and biases. Noticing begins with asking, who are we? Who are our users? How are we respectively situated relative to opportunity and institutional power? And given these realities, how can we create a partnership that is liberating for all? Reflecting can show up in the form of equity pauses, intentional breaks where developers can take a step back to examine what has been learned and what can be improved in regards to designing for equity. Noticing and reflecting can be integrated throughout the design process and practice in collaboration with students and educators. The next practice we'll explore is co-designing with students and educators. This graphic comes from Digital Promise's Inclusive Innovation Framework, which is designed to amplify underrepresented voices through a radical commitment to equity. In this model, developers come together with researchers, students, educators, and other community members to co-create solutions. Instead of designing for users, developers recognize and engage these groups as co-experts in the design process. Together, the stakeholders lead, participate in, and derive value from the innovation process. The community remains central across all 5 of these stages. The results are solutions that are developed with and for a particular community of users with an eye towards scaling across similar contexts. This next slide expands on the role of research within early stage EdTech product development as a tool to improve products as well as to understand efficacy. This illustration of the EdTech research journey comes from a guide published by NewSchools, which highlights 4 key research practices. Define your intended impact, iterate based on feedback from usability and feasibility testing, evaluate evidence of student outcomes, and share what you learn about your impact. Of course, for any of these, it's important to consider both costs and return on investment. That said, we've observed a trend of increased investment in these areas by both ventures and impact funders. Ultimately, we believe that research-based product development is important to start early and revisit continuously as the product develops. It's not meant to be a linear progression, but an iterative process that engages students, educators, and researchers throughout. Final practice I'll talk about today is building equity into your user and revenue growth model. At NewSchools, we encourage entrepreneurs to treat their revenue models like their products, to prototype, gather feedback, and refine beginning early in the development process. Over time, we are seeing increased demand for technology-enabled products that are both equity-centered and research-based. Demand for products that provide evidence of supporting equitable outcomes will be further amplified by emergency school closures and increases in remote learning caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the new federal stimulus funds that are coming into the school system. Not only is building equity into your growth model the right thing to do from a social impact perspective, we also believe there's a solid business case. For example, equity-based design decisions can represent a key differentiator from competitive products and potentially unlock new sources of revenue or investment capital. So to recap, 5 practices to support your impact: address critical student needs, notice and reflect throughout the design process, co-design with students and educators, use research to improve products and measure outcomes, and finally, build equity into your growth model.
Cameron, thank you so much for your time tonight. And you know, if we have any questions, we'll send them over to you. You probably won't have any questions, but no, thank you so much, and thank you for your time tonight.
I appreciate it, and apologies again for those technical difficulties, but I enjoyed being here, and thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.